One man commanded an empire, the other struggled to command his own body. Saladin marched at the head of tens of thousands of seasoned warriors. Egypt and Syria stood united beneath his banner, and wherever his armies advanced, cities surrendered and kingdoms trembled. Facing him was a king who was barely 16. His body was being consumed by leprosy. Every passing year stole more of his strength. Many believed his kingdom would fall long before he did. By every measure, numbers, power, experience, even health, the outcome was already decided. Yet when news came that Saladin was marching toward Jerusalem, Baldwin did not retreat behind his walls. He mounted his horse. With only a few hundred knights and a small army at his back, the young king rode out across the burning plains to face the greatest commander of his age. Why would a dying king challenge an army that outnumbered his own many times over? And how did that impossible decision become one of the greatest victories in the history of the Crusades? This is the extraordinary true story of Baldwin IV and the Battle of Montgisard. Jerusalem, 1174. A crown was placed upon the head of a boy who had barely begun to understand what it meant to rule. Baldwin IV of Jerusalem ascended the throne at just 13 years old. Not a warrior forged by time, not a man shaped by years of command, but a child still learning the weight of his own name. Yet even as the ceremony unfolded, fate was already at work beneath the surface. For beneath the gold, beneath the chance, beneath the illusion of stability, his body had already begun to betray him. Leprosy, silent, merciless, unrelenting, had taken hold. And so the crown did not rest upon the head of a future conqueror, but upon a boy condemned to witness his own strength fade long before his enemies ever struck a blow. The face that once held the promise of youth began to change, marked by wounds that would not heal, by skin that no longer responded as it once did to life itself. To preserve what remained of his dignity, he was bound in layers of cloth, hidden from view, as though even the sight of him might reveal the fragility of the throne he now carried. A metal mask came to rest upon his face, sealing the king behind something that was no longer fully human, yet still undeniably alive. Leprosy stole sensation from his hands and feet, turning strength into numbness, motion into uncertainty. Yet Baldwin rode. He mounted his horse when others would have remained still. He learned to fight not only enemies beyond his kingdom, but the rebellion of his own body, gripping reins he could barely feel, commanding a form that no longer obeyed as it once had. Before he ever wore the crown, however, he was already a child of fracture. His father, Amalric I of Jerusalem, ruled a kingdom shaped by ambition and constant pressure from surrounding powers. His mother, Agnes of Courtenay, was later separated from the royal court after their marriage was annulled, when Baldwin was still very young. Baldwin was only 13 when his father died. The kingdom did not find unity in succession, but uncertainty. The High Court of Jerusalem gathered, not in celebration, but in unease. Behind closed doors, voices rose and clashed, circling a truth none could ignore, that the boy, the heir, carried whispers of a hidden illness, leprosy. Yet there was no other. Baldwin was the king's only son. For 3 days, the court argued, ambition against necessity, fear against survival, until at last, with no path left unchosen, they placed the fate of Jerusalem into the hands of a boy already marked by time. Baldwin was crowned, but he could not yet rule. Power shifted into the hands of regents and nobles who now governed in his name, each carrying their own ambitions and interpretations of Jerusalem's future. Only later, upon reaching the age of majority at 15, would he fully assume direct control of the kingdom he had inherited. But by then, the world beyond Jerusalem was already shifting. A new power was rising, one whose name would soon echo across every frontier of the Holy Land. Saladin, born Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, Sultan of Egypt, conqueror of Damascus, unifier of a fractured Muslim world that had long been divided by competing ambitions and broken authority. He was no stranger to war, nor to the discipline it demanded. Under the influence of Nur ad-Din, Saladin learned not only how to fight, but how to command conquest itself, how to turn victory into structure and armies into order. He became a man of discipline and restraint, one who would not seek Jerusalem through chaos, but through patient, deliberate design. Where others burned out, Saladin persisted. Where others fractured, Saladin unified. Saladin had done what no Muslim leader had managed in 80 years. He'd united Egypt and Syria under one banner. And as his influence expanded, the divide between two worlds became impossible to ignore. On one side stood Jerusalem, under Baldwin, small, fragile, and forced into constant defense. Its strength lay not in numbers, but in endurance, relying on fortresses, uneasy alliances, and rare unity. Even its victories were desperate, born at the edge of survival. On the other side, Saladin's power had become an empire in motion. From Egypt to Syria, soldiers, wealth, and loyalty gathered into one force. Divided lands were drawn into unity, cities subdued, territories bound together into a coordinated machine of war. His army swelled, disciplined cavalry, seasoned commanders, and vast forces answering to a single will. Each victory strengthened the next. So this was no longer simply a conflict between two kings, but between a kingdom struggling to endure and a rising power reshaping the world around it. And then, in 1177, like a distant crack carried across burning sands, the news finally arrived in Jerusalem. Saladin was no longer merely expanding. He was marching toward open confrontation. He had set his attention toward the Crusader heartland with an army of 26,000 warriors, the largest the region had seen in generations. They were marching towards the coast, burning villages, scattering defenders, moving with the confidence of men who believe resistance was futile. Jerusalem did not receive this news as a surprise. It received it as the moment it had long feared was finally taking shape. Inside the city's stone walls, urgency replaced uncertainty. The High Court of Jerusalem, the realm's fragile governing council, was summoned. Nobles, military commanders, and influential barons gathered beneath the weight of a decision that would shape the survival of their kingdom. Voices rose, some calling for immediate mobilization, others urging caution, calculating what little strength remained. The kingdom was still recovering from internal divisions, still stretched thin across vulnerable frontiers. Every option carried the shadow of consequence. Some argued that they should fortify Jerusalem itself, preparing for a siege they might not withstand. Others insisted on meeting Saladin in the field, striking before his full strength could descend upon them. But beneath every argument lay the same unspoken truth. They were no longer deciding from a position of strength, but from the narrowing space between survival and collapse. Outside those walls, war was coming. Inside them, the kingdom debated whether it could afford to stand and face it. As the council chamber descended deeper into division, voices began to rise over one another. What had begun as strategy slowly unraveled into conflict between fear and defiance, each lord clinging to his own vision of survival. For a moment, Jerusalem itself seemed uncertain of its own response. At the head of the chamber was Baldwin, who listened from his throne, the silver mask catching torchlight, impossible to read. When the argument evolved into shouting, he raised one gloved hand. And then, silence fell like a blade. In that quiet, the young king spoke. "Summon every knight we have," he said, his voice steady, despite the weakness in his frame. "We will not retreat behind walls. We will not wait for inevitability to arrive at our gates. We will meet Saladin in the field." The room erupted. "Madness," they said. "Suicide. The king was ill, fevered, not thinking clearly. Better to preserve the army than throw it away in a doomed gesture." But Baldwin had already stood, and his next words cut through the chaos. "If we hide behind walls while Saladin burns our kingdom, we are already defeated. True faith without actions is surrender dressed in prayer. We ride at dawn." That day, knights were summoned from scattered strongholds. Armor that had grown still in storage was brought back into light and fire, each piece cleaned, repaired, and bound once more to the promise of war. Horses were prepared, reins tightened, saddles checked. Every order passed through the understanding that what was being gathered was not an army of expansion, but an army of necessity. From the scattered baronies and distant frontier cities, men answered the call, not in waves, but in fragments. 500 knights, perhaps a few thousand infantry. It was everything Baldwin IV of Jerusalem could gather in such little time. Every blade, every horse, every willing hand. And still, it was nowhere near enough. In the quiet hours before the march, when the city's movement softened into distant echoes and steel faded into stillness, Baldwin withdrew from the noise of command. Alone, within a sanctuary, he knelt down and prayed. He stood not as a king surrounded by counsel, but as a man before his God. The crown he wore was invisible in that silence, yet heavier than any gold. He prayed not for ease, nor for escape from what was coming. He prayed for the strength to carry what could not be set down, for a kingdom that looked to him even as his own flesh betrayed him, for men who would soon ride into uncertainty under his name. In that stillness, Baldwin was no longer merely a ruler bound by illness. He was a figure of resolve, held together by conviction. A king dying slowly, yet choosing to stand anyway. And in that act of faith, unseen by armies and councils, he became something greater to those who would follow him. Not just their sovereign, but the quiet assurance that even in the shadow of weakness, courage could still take shape. So, Jerusalem moved. The road ahead was long and uncertain. As they advanced beyond the city's reach, the land opened into wide, dry expanses. With each passing hour, the sound of hooves and footsteps settled into a steady rhythm. No longer the noise of preparation, but the sound of commitment made real. Dust began to rise beneath them, first in faint trails, then in thick, rolling clouds that clung to armor and cloth alike. The soldiers rode in silence. Steel hid their faces, their eyes reduced to thin slits behind worn helms, each man alone beneath the weight of what awaited. Somewhere within the moving silence, a voice finally broke through. "My king, it is not too late." It was Reginald of Sidon, one of the king's commander, riding close. "We can still turn back. We do not have to meet them like this. Not here. Not now." For a moment, there was only the sound of hooves pressing into dry earth. Then Baldwin answered. "If we turn back now," he said, his voice steady despite the weight within it, "we do not preserve the kingdom. We surrender it." Reginald's grip tightened on the reins. 500 men cannot stand against an army of that size. "No," Baldwin replied quietly. "But 500 men behind walls, waiting to be surrounded, will not save it either." Reginald did not answer, because in that moment, the choice was no longer between safety and danger, but between fading quietly behind stone, or standing, however briefly, in defiance of what was coming. Within that marching host, Beyond steel and dust, and the tired rhythm of hooves, there was something they carried that was not forged for war. It was the true cross, a relic believed to hold the memory of sacrifice itself, born into battle as both symbol and sanctuary. Encased and carefully guarded, it was raised above the moving army, its presence cutting through the haze of dust like a quiet declaration against fear. For the men of Jerusalem, it was more than wood and history. It was assurance, a reminder that their struggle was not only for land, but for faith, woven into the very reason they had come so far from distant shores. As they rode on, the land itself began to speak of what awaited them. The villages grew quiet. Doors hung open where life had once passed through them. Pathways lay undisturbed, as though those who lived there had fled in haste, leaving behind the echoes of lives interrupted. No voices, no movement, only the hollow stillness of abandonment. Baldwin and his army passed through them without a word. And beyond those empty places, the horizon told a harsher truth. In the distance, smoke rose in dark, winding columns, villages already claimed by Saladin's advance. Fire consumed what had not been abandoned, its glow flickering against the fading light, marking the path of an army that did not need to announce its presence. This was the cost of delay, the cost of hesitation. Each burnt settlement, each silent home, was a message carried across the land. This is what follows if no one stands. War was no longer approaching. It had already arrived. At night, Baldwin's army came to a halt. They camped without fires. No flames to warm them, no light to betray their position to the enemy that moved somewhere beyond the dark. The men settled into silence once more, resting beneath the open sky, their armor still close, their weapons never far from reach. Hunger lingered, fatigue pressed heavily upon them. But louder than both was the quiet awareness that dawn would bring decision. Some slept, many did not. They lay awake, staring into the darkness, listening to the distant wind carry with it the faint, uncertain echoes of a war not yet seen, but already felt. That night, Baldwin knelt again, not in the sanctuary, but in open air, under stars so bright that seemed close enough to touch. His face lifted up to the sky, shoulders shaking, whether from illness, fear, or ecstasy. Impossible to say. One of his servants found him. "Sire, you need to rest," the servant said to him. "I need a miracle," Baldwin whispered. "I need God to see us, to remember why we're here, to grant us an impossible day." In the distance, miles across the plain, campfire of Saladin's army glows like a field of fallen stars. Thousands of fires. An army so vast it seemed to own the night. Against that vastness, 500 knights were less than a spark. As the first light stretched across the land, Baldwin's army stirred to purpose. One by one they gathered. Knights, soldiers, men of every rank, drawn not by command alone, but by something deeper. At the foot of that hill stood the Bishop of Jerusalem, leading them in prayer. Voices rose together in unity, each word carried with the weight of men who knew what stood before them. They did not pray for victory alone. They prayed for the strength to face what was coming. And when the final words faded into the morning air, there was no longer doubt among them, only readiness. In late November 1177, Saladin reached Ascalon, a crucial coastal stronghold of the Crusader kingdom. From there, he expected confrontation. Baldwin, already moving with his forces, advanced to meet him. But what awaited them on the horizon was not a balanced field of battle, but the overwhelming scale of Saladin's army. 26,000 men, cavalry, infantry, archers, Syrians, Egyptian siege engineers, a force so massive it took hours to pass a single point. The sight alone changed the calculation. Realizing the vast disparity in numbers, Baldwin made a swift and difficult decision to withdraw into Ascalon rather than risk annihilation in open engagement. In the meantime, Baldwin sent urgent orders to the Knights Templar, calling them to abandon Gaza and reinforce his position. Saladin, observing the situation, interpreted this moment differently. He underestimated Baldwin. Believing the Crusader forces within Ascalon posed no immediate threat, he made a critical choice of his own. He continued his advance, redirecting his campaign toward Jerusalem itself, expecting little resistance behind him. But assumption in war is often the first fracture. A lone scout, dust-covered, breath unsteady, rode through the gates of Ascalon, carrying news that could not wait. Saladin had split his forces, a vast host, 20,000 strong, spreading across the land like a slow-moving shadow, fanning outward to forage and gather additional resources. And at its edge, a smaller force, 6,000 men, with Saladin himself at its head, moving steadily toward Jerusalem, certain that the boy king behind the walls would not dare to follow. It was the opening Baldwin had been praying for, a divided enemy. The discipline of unity had loosened, replaced by the ease of assumption. Baldwin immediately summoned his commanders, gathering them within the stone walls of Ascalon. Maps were unrolled, voices low at first, then rising. 6,000 is still an army, one warned. We are outnumbered, another pressed. Even divided, they will crush us. The arguments came quickly, urgently, like men trying to outrun what they already feared. This is not strategy, a voice broke through. It is suicide. But Baldwin did not waver. His gaze remained fixed, not on the men before him, but on the path ahead. They are divided, he said quietly, and they do not expect us to move. Silence followed. Then, with the weight of a crown that had never offered mercy, he gave the order. We ride at dawn. We would meet Saladin at Montgissard. The council fell silent as Baldwin stepped forward once more. His voice was calm, but absolute. This will not be a charge of chaos, he said. It will be ordered, focused, unbroken. He traced the plan over the map spread across the table. The center will hold them, not push, hold. The flanks will strike like iron closing in. A pause, then the name was spoken. Iron Wedge. The formation was simple in design, but brutal in execution. A disciplined corps of Templars knights driving straight into the enemy's center, absorbing the weight of the impact, while mounted Crusader knights on both sides curved inward, closing the gap, tightening like a blade driven deeper with every advance. It was brilliant, but insane. Some commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Odo of Saint Amman, the Templars' Grand Master, stepped forward, voice low but firm. Your Majesty, even with formation, even with discipline, this is still 500 against thousands. Wedge or no wedge, steel cannot change numbers. Another followed quickly. We are marching into annihilation, not battle. Then Baldwin turned. We are not striking their strength, he said. We are striking their mistake. His gaze hardened slightly. They are spread. They are feeding. They believe we are trapped behind walls. A pause. And so we will show them we are not. Outside the chamber, horns began to sound. The order had already left the room. November 25th, 1177. Dawn. A 16-year-old Leper King rode out to face the greatest military force the Holy Land had ever seen. 500 knights against the most powerful sultan in the Muslim world. They were supposed to be crushed in hours. Instead, history records the impossible. They would hold the charge. They would break Saladin's formation apart. They would send the most feared army in the region running back across the desert. and they would prove to the world that courage doesn't need a healthy body. It needs an unbreakable will.